right. And so welcome, Brittany. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for the introduction and thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm really excited to talk with everybody, and I see you've already got some great responses in the chat box. So thank you. It looks like we have a whole range of journaling experience here. Some people love it. Some people have tried it and didn't really get into it. Some people have never tried it. So that's awesome. We can definitely talk about all those different experiences. So yes, again, thank you for having me. This is my book, Journal Like a Stoic, just came out in the United States in November. And I'm very excited to talk to you about journaling and Stoicism in general. So Tim, did you want me to start off with some specific questions?
I've got a few questions for you, if you don't mind. Yeah,
Sure.
and then we can jump into our work today. We are a working group, so we want to definitely have time for that. But can you tell us a little bit, Brittany, how did you become interested in Stoicism?
So it was about 6 years ago. I know the exact date, October 2016. I'm gonna have to start saying 7 years now. We're in a new year. I was in a kind of a crisis in my life. I had moved to a new place where I didn't have any friends or family. I had just ended a career that I loved. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do next. I had 3 young kids at home. I had just had my third child. So it was a very, very difficult time in my life, a crossroads for sure. So I had what I like to call it with my friend Catherine Coramilis, we call it the shipwreck moment, which is very characteristic of Stoicism going all the way back to Zeno. As many of you probably know, the founding myth of Stoicism says that Zeno was a successful merchant in the Mediterranean. And one day he lost his ship, lost all of his wealth, lost everything. And he was bereft and wandering around Athens and came across a bookshop. And he picked up a book on the life of Socrates and was so inspired by Socrates' example. He asked the bookseller, "Where can I find a man like this these days?" And there happened to be a philosopher passing by, Crates, and the bookseller pointed and said, "Follow that man." And so that was the beginning of Zeno's philosophy journey. And of course, he later went on to found his own school, Stoicism. But I think that moment resonates with a lot of us, certainly with me. That's how I felt. Stoicism was a solace in a shipwreck moment. I actually, one day, I had been looking around at different wisdom traditions, different self-help books. And one day I finally just went on Amazon and typed in wisdom in the search box, which is always, you never know what you're going to get. But one of the books that popped up for me was William Irvin's A Guide to the Good Life. So that was my first book on Stoicism. And I was pretty much hooked from that point on. And I just kept reading, kept digging more. I went back to the original Stoics, kept reading more modern interpretations. So that's how I found Stoicism.
Excellent. That is such a great phrase, a shipwreck moment. And I bet everybody on the call has a version of that they could speak to. So I love that. And briefly about your previous book, which is really a good book too, more geared toward parents. Is that right?
Thank you. Yes, Tranquility Parenting was my first book. It's been out, so it came out in 2019. So yes, if anyone is interested in parenting, that's an option too.
Yeah, super book. Can you tell us a little bit about this current book, how it came about? What was your motivation for putting out this one that's out there right now?
Yeah, so that was actually a bit of a surprise because the publisher actually came to me and said, "Hey, we're looking for someone to write this book." They had identified a gap in the market where, there are some really good journaling resources for Stoics, but not a lot to choose from. So they kind of said, "Hey, we'd like to do a 90-day program." And they had the initial idea and they wanted someone to fill that in. So I was very happy to take that on. They kind of had just some basic themes and I built it out. It was an opportunity for me to share some of the quotes that I find most inspirational and then offer an interpretation, a modern interpretation of those quotes. It can be intimidating for people who have never explored philosophy before or ancient texts. You pick up something that Epictetus wrote and it can be very different and difficult to interpret. So part of what I'm doing in this book is just making it relevant. How can this particular lesson help you today in your life? Because it is still relevant. We just need to kind of pick out the parts that are most helpful for us.
Right. Excellent. It reminds me, I'm a big fan of Ryan Holiday's Daily Stoic. And it does remind me, it's got, that feel of kind of the daily short reflection. But what I like about this is that it really, gives you that extra step of, hey, let's write and really reflect on it, not just read it and put it away, and really spend some time with the passage. So I like that. Will there be a Kindle version?
No talk of that yet. I
Okay.
think the publisher really put a lot of effort into the physical product, which you, Tim, have noted in a very, very pretty way, that you talked about how it feels good in your hands, and it has some really nice illustrations in it as well. And for those who haven't seen the book, there's also space to actually write in it. So it's very much a journal in the sense that you get the prompts, but also the space to actually write. So you can keep everything in one place. So I haven't heard any talk about a Kindle version, just because I think, it's a very physical product. But who knows? Never say
Yeah.
never.
Yeah, I like a lot of people now. Some of my books I have on Kindle, some I have both, just because it's so handy to. But I can see where this would be more of a physical book, because I'm filling up the pages right in the book, so it's really, really cool. Future projects on tap for you? Anything you want to talk about? And maybe your work with Stoic Hair, or anything you want to mention?
Yeah, so a couple of things. We do have a course on Stoic love, which is coming up, excuse me, with Stoic Care in February, the month of love. We're doing an online course through Teachable. So it's about learning to love yourself and learn others more deeply. So kind of both of those, everything about Stoic love. So if anyone's interested, I can send the link through at the end of this talk. And another thing I wanted to mention is the Stoic Summit, which is coming up through Modern Stoicism. Modern Stoicism hasn't had an in-person event for, organization-wide since 2019, since before the pandemic. So we thought, hey, maybe the time is right. People want to get together. So we're having a Stoic Summit in Tampa in April 1st, not an April Fool's joke. It's really happening. And it's going to be great. We actually have William Irvin there. We have Ward Farnsworth, who many of you know from the Practicing Stoic. We have Greg Lopez, so some really interesting people. And then some people you may not have, excuse me, you may not have heard of, such as Melinda Latour, who is talking about the Stoic mixtape, so Stoicism and music. So we have some kind of new topics, as well as some standbys that you might find very interesting.
Wow. And can you guarantee some nice weather and sunshine when people are down there?
I'll do my best. It will definitely be warmer than Minnesota. I can say
All
that
right,
with confidence.
let's go with that. Let's go with that. Well, that sounds so cool. And I think it's so important for people to start getting together in person. So thank you for putting that together. All right. And so finally, the book is available. Is it just on Amazon? Is it going to be in bookstores, do you know? Or
They are mainly promoting on Amazon. It should be some other places too. I actually, I haven't looked, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it's definitely available on Amazon.
All right. Well, and the final question I have for you now, I put about a month in. And so for me, it's very hard to put new things into my routine. I'm old and stuck in my ways, but I'm about 30 days in. So after 90 days, will there be gold stars available for us that really thrive on that kind of thing?
Just for you, Tim.
Well, all
send
right.
one to you.
I will look for that. Thank you. All right. Hey, I want to jump in because this is a group that is really based on thinking and conversation. So Brittany, what I'm going to do is pull up the sheet, the doc that you sent me, and I'm going to kind of hand it over to you. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
All right. Let's do that. Can you see that okay?
Yes. Would you mind going up a little bit so I can see the very last line?
Yeah, let me do this.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. That good there? All right.
So this is actually from Journal Like a Stoic. Both of these are. So what I'm sharing with you today, you will do if you go through the book on your own. But I picked this one, Building Good Habits, because we are in January, early January. This is the time when people often think about not just resolutions, but taking stock of your life overall and where you want to go, what you want to do. So it's a great time to think about habits. And I love that the ancient Stoics thought about habits and the power of habit long before the 20th century, when people started thinking about building good habits. So we have Epictetus here saying, if you want to do something, make a habit of it. If you want not to do something, refrain from doing it and accustom yourself to something else instead. The same principle holds true in the affairs of the mind also. When you're angry, you may be sure not merely that this evil has befallen you, but that you have strengthened the habit and have, as it were, added fuel to the flame. So this is really powerful, talking about habits, but also the impact of our habits on our character, on who you are, right? Elsewhere, Marcus Aurelius says, the soul is dyed the color of its habitual conceptions. So again, this habit, this idea that what we consistently think about, what we consistently make ourselves do, that is who we become. Our character is the accumulation of our habits, of what we do, both mentally, so our thought habits, the way we tend to think about the world, the way we see things, that is part of our habits, and also resultingly what we do and how we act, how we interact with other people, how we see other people, and our relationship with the wider world. All of this you can break down into our habits, into the ways that we perceive the world and respond to the world. So here I just wanted to emphasize that the ancient Stoics understood this power of habit. And if you allow your mind to ruminate, now ruminate is when your mind goes over an intense loop of something that is not really healthy for you. So it could be anger, it could be resentment. You keep thinking about something that happened the other day at work, for example, and your mind just keeps going over and over that thought, and it's hard to break out of it. So this is an example of rumination. You may notice that I'm speaking here from experience because this is something that I used to do all the time before I found Stoicism. My mind would just get caught, and I felt like I couldn't escape. I felt like I was trapped by my own thoughts. And so Stoicism helps us to break free of this habit, this unhealthy habit that we need to change. So you're welcome to put thoughts in the chat as we're speaking. If you have any questions as I go along, or any responses, anything you'd like me to respond to. But what I'd like for us to do now is kind of go through this together. We've looked at the quote from Epictetus. We've looked at a modern interpretation. And so let's go through these prompts together. So I'm going to give you some time to write for yourself. You're welcome to share whatever of your response you'd like to, including none of it. If you just like to keep it private, perfectly fine. That's definitely an option. But if anybody would like to share, I'm going to read the first prompt to you and give you a few minutes to write about that, and then we'll go to the second one. Okay, so we're thinking about our habits here, and the inspirational question, will you turn your thoughts toward wisdom and excellence, or towards misjudgment and dissatisfaction? Remember, it's up to you where your mind goes, and here we're thinking about how we can establish new habits. So question 1, identify a mental habit you would like to change. What are some triggers that often set off your bad habit? Okay, so I'm going to give you 4 minutes. It's 11:20 my time, 10:20 your time. So at 10:24, we will come back together and start talking about this. All right, so I see a few people are letting us know their bad habits that they would like to change. Anyone who would like to post yours is welcome to do so. Tim's, I love that. Reduce complaining. I think we can all relate to that, which Epictetus talks a lot about as well. Just wipe your nose. Don't complain that noses run. Just wipe it. That's what you have hands to do. Hanukkah, I keep on postponing. Yes, that's a very big one. And Ranjit, self-compassion. Absolutely. That's actually the first section of this book is all about the inner critic, moving past the inner critic. So you might like the first course of that book. High standards, yes, high standards can definitely coexist with stoicism, with self-compassion, but it's difficult. It's difficult to strike the right balance. And I try to please people around me. I can definitely relate to that, trying to make everyone happy. Yeah. Marcus, okay, about purpose, looking for your purpose in life. Postponing the same as procrastination, I would say yes. Procrastination would be just postponing what you're supposed to do. David, thinking that I'm overwhelmed. Okay. Multitasking, yes, we're all overwhelmed these days, right? We have so much coming at us, so many expectations from so many different directions. Andy, starting to build a good one. Okay, tracking time, being more focused and intentional. Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of us are working on that. We feel so drained when we let our attention go in all these different directions and just be pulled around by advertisements or different demands. So being very intentional is a huge help. Stop catastrophic thinking. Absolutely. Stoicism can really help with that. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing that. Let's move on to the second part. After we've identified the habit we'd like to change, what can we think about instead? So when you're in that, when your mind starts to go in that direction with a bad mental habit, how can we get out of that? What's that first kind of catch to get us out of that mental loop? What can we think about instead? So I've found in my experience, the best way to stop something negative is to find something positive, right? You can't fight fire with fire. You have to get water. You have to find something else to put out that fire. So think about something that's very positive for you. It could be a mantra, some kind of virtue that you can really see in your mind, like courage, or a positive goal, such as happiness or tranquility, just something very, very positive to focus on. When your mind starts to go in that bad direction, reorient towards this other one instead. So let's take just 3 minutes this time to think about something that's very, very positive that we can get us out of that mental loop. So I'll give you 3 minutes. It's 11:27, 10:27 your time. So let's go until 10:30. I see some great suggestions already here for positive thoughts to think about. So Marcus says, meeting new people, helping others to be happy. This is very powerful. Getting outside of ourselves and thinking about how we can help others instead. Classic, that's a great idea. And says, putting the small annoyances in perspective mixed with gratitude. Absolutely, we always have something to be thankful for, even if it doesn't seem like it at the moment when we're so caught up in this negative thing. By remembering what we do have to be thankful for, we can pull ourselves out of that. Great suggestion, Anne. Andy says, the powerful tool is to ask how I can turn that situation into a gift and opportunity. Excellent, that's very Stoic. This is what Epictetus says. He says, what do you have that can transform this into gold? So that's what we're doing. We're turning this into a golden opportunity. Marcus, it's difficult to find. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to get outside your issue and take someone else's perspective. But you're right, that's kind of what we're doing here is we're changing our perspective. Thomas, to help me become more accepting of change, cultivate and pride myself on the ability to adapt to new circumstances. Absolutely, you have that gift, you have that ability. So focusing on that can be very powerful. Hanika, already coming a long way, awesome. David, also gratitude. Yes. Ranjit, forgiving and use the energy to rectify my mistakes instead of criticizing. Yes, I ask myself, what could I have done differently? How can I learn from this experience? Very good. Yes. Jen, talk to myself as I would talk to a friend. That's important too. Instead of being so harsh and critical towards yourself, like Ranjit was saying also, I would never be as harsh to a friend as I sometimes am to myself. So why am I doing this to myself? Right? Seneca says we need to become a friend to yourself first. And then when you're more accepting of yourself, then you can also be more accepting of other people and the circumstances in your life. Tim, don't make this worse. Right, because our attitude can sometimes make things even worse than it already is. Absolutely. Yeah, these are great suggestions. And I'll just tell you a couple of things that I've done in the past. When I first started learning about Stoicism, I focused on the dichotomy of control. So I would tell myself, some things are up to me and some things are not. This thing, whatever happened that I was fixating on, isn't up to me. So now I'm going to focus on what is up to me, which is my attitude and all these other things I can do. I can go out and, make a new friend or something like that. And lately I've been thinking more in terms of kind of global Stoicism. So I've started thinking about Stoicism in terms of beauty and love and respect for others. So I focus on these very, very positive pulls. When I start thinking about love, when I start generating loving thoughts towards others, then that helps to knock out all of the really negative ones. So all these are great suggestions. Just spend some time thinking about what works for you and then put it into practice. So the very last part of this question is consider keeping a log to record your progress over the next week. It doesn't have to be in a journal. It could just be a piece of paper. It could be a note on your phone, whatever it is. Just take a few minutes and think about how you're doing. Note how when your mind started to go in one way, were you successfully able to draw it in another direction? So, and then maybe reward yourself at the end of the week. If you've made progress, give yourself a pat on the back, buy yourself a Starbucks coffee, whatever it is that you want. But definitely take some time to think about it and be more intentional. Okay, is this thing worthy of interfering with my tranquility? From Deb. Absolutely. Walking outside in the open air. From Suki. Yes. Okay, Tim, if it's okay with you, we'll move on to the next question. Okay, so I really like this question because it deals with all three aspects of Stoicism. So logic, ethics, and physics. And maybe it would be nice if someone would read this for us. If we have a volunteer, a brave volunteer to read this Marcus Aurelius quote, which I think is very beautiful. If anyone would be willing, you could just raise your hand. Oh, Lauren, awesome. Thank you, Lauren.
excuse me, hasten to examine your own ruling faculty and that of the universe and that of your neighbor, your own, that you may make it just, and that of the universe, that you may remember of what you are a part, and that of your neighbor, that you may know whether they have acted ignorantly or with knowledge, and that you may also consider that their ruling faculty is akin to your own. Marcus Aurelius Meditations 9122. Marcus, did you want me to continue?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you. Okay. Marcus lists 3 aspects of life we should routinely examine: our mind, the universe, and the people around us. These aspects correspond to the 3 Stoic disciplines of logic, physics, and ethics. To live as the great Stoics, take time throughout your busy day to examine your choices and actions in all 3 disciplines.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. You're demonstrating the virtue of courage. Okay, so as Lauren just read for us, and based on Marcus's quote here, we have the 3 different disciplines: logic, which I see as our relationship with ourselves, with our own mind; ethics, our relationship with other people; and physics, our relationship with the wider world, with the cosmos, with all that there is out there. And so here we have 3 different questions to kind of help us reflect on these different aspects. So we'll go through one by one. And question 1, in the past day, how have you tried to see things clearly and accurately? How often have you paid attention to your thoughts, attitude, and choices? So again, this is the discipline of logic. So we're thinking about our own thinking and our relationship to ourselves. So is 3 minutes enough here, or do you need more time? Tim, good? Okay. Then we'll take 3 more minutes. At 10:40, we'll come back together and start sharing our thoughts. All right, everyone, it is 10:40 now. So if you'd like to enter some of your thoughts in the chat here, in the past day, how have you tried to see things clearly and accurately? So thinking about your own thinking. Have you been able to pay attention to your thoughts, attitude, and choices? Or if you haven't done it yet, since we're just now encountering this question, think about some ways that you could do it going forward. For the rest of today, this Saturday, how are you going to pay attention to your own thoughts, your own attitude, and your own choices? And I can give you a couple of examples from my own life. So driving in traffic, this is a great time to test yourself. How stoic are you really? So I've noticed progress as I have become more and more, deeply embedded in stoicism. So when I'm driving now and someone cuts in front of me, in the past, I would have gotten really angry and I would have seen it as an insult. And now I'm able to think about what I'm doing, to think about my own thoughts and say, wait a minute, I'm letting this person interfere with my own happiness. But that doesn't make any sense. I'm not really impacted by what that person is doing. They're doing what they think is best. I don't think that's the best, but it's nothing on me, right? It doesn't have anything to do with me. So Tim says, more aware of judgments. Yes. Oh, sorry. Tim says morning meditation helps me to slow down. Yes, absolutely. So what we're trying to do with a lot of these is bring meditation or our meditative mindset into our everyday lives. So it's wonderful to take this time. Excuse me, I'm recovering from a cold. It's wonderful to take this time in the morning or as a group here. But what we really need to do is bring it into our everyday lives by paying attention and bringing that mindfulness into everything we do. So Andy says, for me, the behavioral thinking pattern is making judgments. Absolutely. This is what we're trying to do here, is improve these judgments and be more aware of them. Absolutely. Thomas, the most significant activity, adequate sleep. Yes, that always helps, doesn't it? Sometimes there are times when you will not have adequate sleep. So every parent knows that when you have a young baby, you just don't get all the sleep you need and you still have to push through it. So there are times when we can do the best, of course, that we can, but we're still going to have to push through without it. So just be prepared, Thomas, for that day if it ever comes. Being more inquisitive, absolutely. Instead of seeing everything as just judgment after judgment, maybe take time to ask why and be filled with a sense of wonder about what's happening around you in the world. The world is wonderful. It's very interesting, exquisite. And oh, my dad is being his negative self. I internally notice how different my attitude is towards the world. Yes, it is difficult when you're around someone who maybe doesn't see the world the way that you do and makes life harder for everyone. Absolutely. So taking some distance from that and realizing what it's doing to you and then finding ways to strengthen yourself or minimize the influence. Absolutely. Ranjit, dump all my thoughts when I'm triggered. Okay. How your thoughts trigger and influence your perception about others. Yep, that goes back to the discipline of judgment. Yep, which is what we're talking about here. And Hanukkah, yes, bring mindfulness to everything you do. Great. Well, let's move on to the second and third questions. In what ways have you shown compassion to the people around you? And what connects you to the larger human experience? We'll do these together. So we'll take about 5 minutes to do these two questions together until 10:49. All right, so coming back and sharing some answers. I love what Anne has already posted. With strangers behaving badly, it helps me to think, what would I need to know about this person and their behavior in order to be able to forgive them? We don't know what people are going through, so a general compassionate attitude is well invested. Absolutely. Everyone has their own story, right? And we know our own story. So sometimes we think other people should give us a pass or should treat us more leniently. But everybody is going through something, right? Everyone has their own personal story. So it is very helpful to remember that even if you don't know anything about them, they do have things going on in their life that you're not aware of. For Thomas, for me, it always helps to substitute myself or someone I know and care about in place of a person about whom I have made a negative judgment or assumption. This practice helps me avoid the mistake of viewing others as one-dimensional. Absolutely. That's very, very stoic of you. Good job. It's all about getting outside of ourselves, right? And shifting that perspective and understanding that all humans have the same tendencies. And we need to show compassion, not only towards ourselves, but towards others as well. Everyone's doing their best in this world, and no one tries to be bad on purpose. They don't try to do what's wrong on purpose. Whatever they're doing, it seemed right to them at the time. And the Stoics, the ancient Stoics, even used the very shocking example of Medea, who killed her own children. And they were saying that she simply made a bad judgment about what the right thing to do was. She was aware of what she was doing. She made the wrong decision, and she deserves our pity rather than our curses, is what they were saying. Very nice, Anne and Thomas. Would anyone else like to share, or what connects you to the larger human experience as well? Joel, sometimes just leave them alone. Right. A lot of times we have a tendency to think that we have to be the ones to do everyone, to show people where they're going wrong or to control them in some way. And you're absolutely right. We don't always have to be that person. Epictetus has a really interesting discourse about how Socrates knew that sometimes you just let other people deal with their own business the way they see fit. It's actually, you're not in a position to help them, to be able to help them. Ranjit, I remind myself that everyone is a part of yes, we're all interconnected, and suffering is a shared human condition. Offering non-judgment, absolutely. There's a lot of judgment out there in the world, right? So the more we can step away from that, and like Marcus Aurelius says, just focus on the facts and not add our judgments all the time. We don't have to have all those judgments. We can just strip that away and focus on the essentials of what's there. Very nice. Tim, someone close to me made some decisions recently I hugely disagreed with. Yeah. In the past, I would have judged right away, but was more patient now. That's awesome. Yeah. Especially when we may not be in a position to change those decisions. Yeah. Recognizing the limits of our influence and control is a major part of Stoicism, I think. Okay. Well, we do have a few more minutes, so anyone who would like to can continue entering their thoughts from our chat, but I am happy to take some other philosophy questions, as Tim mentioned at the beginning. Tim, did you have any particular thoughts on what those questions should be?
Well, I had just written down a few that were just kind of general. If I could toss one up there and at you, thank you, Brittany. So as someone who's been exploring Stoicism and cultivating your practice for a while, how do you continue to be inspired and keep learning and in growing in this practice?
Yeah, I think motivation is a huge component, and it's easy to kind of fall by the wayside. I saw at the beginning, some people said it was hard for them to keep journaling. It's easy to get started, it's hard to keep going. And the same could be said for Stoic practice in general. So for me, what keeps me going is that I can look back and see how much it has already helped me. When I think about where I was 6 years ago, and I actually, this morning, I was doing a thought experiment. If I hadn't discovered Stoicism, where would I be right now? What kind of person would I be? Where would my mind be? What kind of mental condition would I have? And I can honestly say, I don't know. I don't know where I would be if I hadn't found Stoicism, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be nearly as good as it is right now. I can see that development over the past few years and how I'm much, much better off where I am right now. And so that growth, being able to look back and see that it has worked in the past, really encourages me to keep going. I'm far from perfect now, so I want to keep pushing on. Maybe 6 more years from now, I'll look back and say, hey, I'm even happier. My life is even better because I was able to keep practicing. So for me, I find a lot of motivation there, knowing that I'll never be perfect, but I can continue to have a richer and richer life. I see it in terms of the richness of my life, right? It's not that I want to be a perfect person, but it's that I want to experience the best life that I possibly can. As Tony Long says, the best mindset available to human beings. So that keeps me motivated and keeps me, when I wake up in the morning, I have my time to do my Stoic studies, whether it's journaling, writing, reading, whatever it is, meditating. I just have that space where I can get my mindset right for the day. So does that answer your question?
Thank you. Excellent. Yeah. And I think Anne has a question.
Anne.
Yeah, thank you. Just out of curiosity, and not because it would make any difference or is relevant to your progress, but because my husband, for example, told me that he sees major changes in me. Do you have, did you get some feedback from people around you, be it your, I don't know, family, friend, someone that said there is as I said, not because it's relevant, but just because I'm interested in it, whether other people also see a change in you or whether it's more of an internal thing?
Yeah, well, I will say a few months ago, my 6-year-old son, we were just driving down the road one day, and out of the blue, he said, Mama, how do you always stay so calm? So I take that as positive feedback. And of course, I'm not always calm. That is a little bit of an overstatement, but I thought, okay, I must be doing something right here. So yeah, that was my biggest compliment from the mouth of a 6-year-old.
Brittany, I had a question for you also. You, in your last paragraph here, you talk, or the passage by Marcus talks about the ruling faculty. Can you shed a little more light on that? And that's a little bit abstract for us. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, good question. So this would be the hegemonikon, which was the ancient Greek name for your mental capacities, for your mind. Sometimes it's difficult to translate exactly what they meant. I tend to think of this as, I equate it to mind, and Epictetus uses a different term, prohairesis, which I think of as the self. Oftentimes it's translated as will or a volition or your character, but I think of the prohairesis as self and ruling faculty as mind. So with the distinction that things occur to our minds that are not of our own doing, right? The mind is kind of like the clearinghouse, kind of like the operating system, but things come up to the mind and then we decide what to do with that. And that would be our prohairesis that makes that decision. The mind is just where things take place, the ruling faculty. So for those of you who are familiar with Epictetus's terminology of prohairesis, that's how I see the difference between those two. But just know that it is kind of your mind and what governs you.
Interesting. Can I just clarify that real quick? Because that was so helpful, because sometimes these are just used kind of interchangeably. So what I took away was the prohairesis is that really that our essential self, whereas the hegemonikon is just the broader sense of the mind, where a lot of involuntary things happen. Weird thoughts can pop up or feelings, but the prohairesis is where we really have that volition. Does that sound right? Yeah.
Exactly. And keep in mind, that's my interpretation. I've never heard anyone else say that. That's what I've come up with based on all of my reading and thinking about how these two relate to each other. So yes, that's a good summary, Tim.
Thank you. It looks like Lauren has a question. Lauren?
Well, continuing on with that thread, are there any good Stoic quotes that address the idea of recognizing that our minds whisper lies to us, as they manufacture silly nonsense, and sometimes it's just not worth putting the effort in to try to question it and break it down because it literally is just a bunch of lies. So do the Stoics have any quotes that sort of address simply ignoring it, telling it to just shut up?
So Epictetus does say something interesting, and I don't remember, I don't have the citation here, but he does say sometimes your imagination will gnaw at you and then you just talk to it. Okay, so Epictetus does clearly recognize that not all of our mental processes are under our voluntary control, right? This is his term imagination. So, but what he says is that you don't necessarily just ignore it. It's not about shoving it under the carpet, right? Sweeping it under the carpet, because then it's still there. You know it's under the carpet. It's about talking to that and changing the way that you see the world so that that just disappears. It's about developing the proper judgments about the world. So for example, instead of thinking, oh, everyone around me thinks I'm a bad person or everyone doesn't like me, you actually question those assumptions. You say, is that an accurate representation of the world? Is it? Is it a fact that every single person around me doesn't like me? It's not a fact. I have no way of knowing that. That's an opinion. That's something that my mind is adding on to the fact that this person, this one person here did X, Y, Z that I didn't like. My mind is adding on everything else to that. I'm going to talk to those things that I know are not true and get rid of all of those things that are not true. It's about focusing on what you know to be true. It's about clarity and simplifying. So it's not that we ignore things, Lauren, it's about finding out the truth and getting rid of all those extra things, all the baggage that's weighing us down that we don't need because it's not true, right? So I'd be happy to recommend some books. I don't have a lot of time now to go into that, and it's a very big thing. It's a huge process, but I'd be happy to recommend some other books that might help with that process, and I can give those to Tim to send later. Thomas?
Yeah. First, thank you for sharing all of this with us this morning. It's great. So I really appreciate it. It's yeah, my question is a little less philosophical, but I'd be interested since you're involved at in like Stoic care and modern Stoicism, some of these organizations. What are some ways that like us, kind of normal people, I guess, can maybe help spread these ideas, or I don't know, what are some like bottlenecks that you see in limiting the the spread of these ideas? Because I mean, I'm biased, but I think they could help everyone, and definitely eager to contribute in that way. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. Well, the number one thing you can do is to be a Stoic in your everyday life, right? And so kind of spread things that way. People come to you and say, hey, what's your secret? Why are you always so calm? Or why are you so happy and caring towards other people, or whatever it is? I think our life choices in general can have a big impact. So one thing that we advocate at Stoic Care is volunteering, right? Maybe you already do some things. Being able to do as much as you can is a great way to help other people. And I would also be happy to consider a blog post from you if you're involved in some kind of projects that you feel are helping other people. You can email me at Stoic Care. We do have a blog, so you can read about how other people are helping spread Stoicism and Stoic principles to others. We have one post coming out next week, actually, about a Stoic in Colorado who has become a volunteer for the crisis text line. So when someone is, having suicidal ideation, they have this line they can text to, and he's a volunteer on the other end where he helps talk people down from, this really serious thing that they're going through. I believe he says in the blog post, he's put in 200 hours helping people through crisis text line. Yeah, it's a very big deal. I think you go through 30 hours of training is what he said, but he's helped, however many people to move forward and perhaps not end their lives at that time. So a hugely significant undertaking and gift to other people, to society. So that's coming out Monday. If you're interested in that, tune into that blog post. And I think there's a link where you can, or now you can just go type in crisis text line if that's something of interest to you. I think they're looking for volunteers who are maybe operating through the night. I think a lot of this happens at night when people are feeling really desperate. So if that's something that you could offer, that would be awesome. But there are so many other ways you can give. I'm trying to think of some other good volunteer opportunities. The Stoic Fellowship. So I believe Tim, Minnesota Stoics is part of the Stoic Fellowship.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So the Stoic Fellowship is just a network of Stoic groups all over the world. And we are having a month of service in April. So if you haven't gone to the Stoic Fellowship's website, this might be a good time to check that out. I think stoicfellowship.com/service should give you some information. I'm also happy to send Tim a couple of links. And we will be doing the 1000 Stoics challenge. So we're challenging everyone, all Stoics, to come together for 1,000 acts of kindness and service throughout the month of April. So that would be awesome for you to participate in, or for Minnesota Stoics as a group to participate in. So I think just doing things like that would be wonderful. I was talking with Karen Duffy the other day, who has a wonderful book called Wise Up. I would recommend that to everyone. And she said that she had donated a copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations to her doctor's office. So people who are there in the waiting room, perhaps going through difficult things, can pick up a copy of the Meditations. And I think that's a brilliant idea. So, there are things that we can find, just little ways, pay it forward in a coffee shop, or, call up somebody that you wouldn't normally call up just to say hello or give them a compliment or something. So I think we can find lots of ways like that.
Excellent ideas. Are you okay for another question or two, Brittany? Or are you doing okay?
Oh,
Are we ready to wrap up?
Yeah, I need to
Yeah.
run soon.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Any final, how about this? Any final questions that people are just dying to throw out there, and then we will let Brittany go. All right. Well, I just want to say on behalf of the Minnesota Stoics that this was an extraordinary session. Thank you for joining us. Brittany Polat from Florida, and founder of Stoic Care. And again, the book is Journal Like a Stoic, and you are always welcome to join us at any time. Just shoot me an email if you just want to hang out with us and share another lesson sometime. But we are, I'm just encouraging everyone to get the book and start their journaling journey. So thanks again, Brittany.
Thank you, Tim. It was a pleasure
All right.
being here. It was so nice meeting all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we will say goodbye to Brittany. She has to run, and I'm going to just go ahead and stop my recording here. And I'll stop my recording, and then we will